So when CS3D was announced, we decided to unpack it and say, what can stand in the way of small businesses, cooperative farmers, if CS3D were to come into effect at that time? So we selected 4 countries and 3 value chains. Cocoa, of course, coffee, and textiles in Eswatini. Coffee in Uganda and Ethiopia, cocoa in Ghana. To say what could be the accompanying measures that were needed to support small businesses, cooperatives, and individuals, and actually countries also, to prepare for CS3D. So in one of those countries, let me not say the name, we gathered in the room to present CS3D. And it was a very tense conversation. And they said, the value chain actor said, just before we got used to the last one, here comes another. And it generated a lot of debate. What does that mean? Who is going to determine who complies and who doesn't comply? What are the modalities? And above all, who is going to pay for the extra burden of yet another, let us say, standard or policy, as it were? And that is to say that the value chain actors are quite weary and tired, maybe, of the various facets and nature of regulations and policy. You might call it policy fatigue. It is coming from national governments. It's coming from regional groups. It is coming from standard setters. It's coming from certification groups. Can we imagine a day where this can be simpler, more sanitized, and understandable, and actually usable by our constituents, by value chain actors? Is it an ideal too far into the future, or it is within our grasp? This is a difficult topic that my panel will be engaging with. So, what are the implications of these policies, the myriads of policies, and what do they actually mean for the value chains today and into the future? So my panel, Dr. Mawuli Coffie, as you know, is the country director of World Cocoa Foundation, based here in Ghana. Shall we give him a hand? Claudia Maier. Claudia leads the work on value chains in cocoa, right? In Ghana for GIZ. Shall we give Claudia a hand? And Stephen Doso leads the work on Proforest. And the 3 of them will try to help us unpack this difficult question that I have framed. So let me start with you, Dr. Coffie, and this goes to all of you. So from your perspective, where is the biggest gap today between policy ambition and practice on the ground when we talk about sustainability?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Larry. I'm glad that I'm on this panel with you so we can dive deeper into this conversation. As we all know, the policy frameworks emanate at the global, regional, and country level. And they have far-reaching implications for value chain actors, especially for smallholders, if you are talking about cocoa, where, as we established in an earlier conversation, the holdings are small. There are no large plantations with a lot of scale. So every policy has significant impact on small producers. But just to give you a few of them, first and foremost, there is cost to every policy. There is the need for tools that are used to implement these policies. We have infrastructure, we have interpretation, we have awareness, and then we have knowledge. All are needed for policy to become effective. But I think the major issue is the duplicity of policies and the multiplicity of the policies. So you have so many policies at national levels, global, regional levels, and you have some of them are coming from different directions, but they are all aiming at the same. Now, for farmers, that becomes a huge issue to actually interpret and have the necessary tools and capacity to actually follow. Now, for farmers also, one of the major issues for them is predictability. They want to be sure what is next. But within the policy environment, the major issue is they don't even know when the next policy will come and where it will come from. It will come from the national level, it will come from the global level, and before you are aware, it springs out from any of the organizations that is managing trade across the globe. So I think the major gap is inconsistency in the way policy is, formulated and implemented across value chains, specifically with cocoa. So if you take that to cocoa, for example, the next day it is that, the next day it is this. But the huge issue is who bears the cost. Every policy has a cost to it. Every policy has a cost. And that cost, who bears it? The gap is we have not defined in any of these policy frameworks who bears the cost. But ordinarily, it goes to the main origin of our supply chains, which is small farmers. And that is where I think policy disconnect a little bit from the ground, what is happening. So maybe one of the things that we'll be talking about is how do we make sure that we can manage the misalignment between what is happening at the level of policy and what is happening on the ground.
Claudia, what's your take on that one?
Yeah, I would say that maybe one thing is EUDR is not something that is just falling on African countries, cocoa producing countries, but it's the same for all countries in Europe or US or wherever. So when the EU has started the cocoa talks, I guess this was a very significant step for bringing the stakeholders together. And that is necessary because, first of all, you have to find common ground there. If there's alignment in terms of the interest of the different stakeholders, then it is still get a process running. In this case, I guess at least the public sector, the private sector has been very much involved in that. Well, farmer representatives have been in those meetings, but as you know, this was very high-level meetings, and I guess this is maybe not the way how you can get farmers on board. If I am in the field now, then I was just recently now seeing a fair trade cooperative and talking about EUDR, and I found that the level of knowledge is still improvable. So I think as well that you cannot convince farmers with a lot of talking. I think farmers, they need tangible effects that they see, that they feel, that puts more money in their pockets. So I think that in a whole, this is something, premiums for compliance with EUDR, premiums for compliance for CSDDD, and so on. This must be taken into consideration, and yeah, I mean, those systems are for the time being not finalized here. So the GCTS of the COCOBOT, the traceability system, is still under process in a way. It's a living system, so changes have to be done at all times. And this premium thing is discussed, and of course it's not okay that people who do not comply get the same cocoa price for the beans like people who comply. That's it for the time being.
Thank you very much. And Stephen.
Thank you. So I will speak from the deforestation angle. So there's zero deforestation commitments, but then a lot of deforestation is still happening. So companies set several commitments to address deforestation within their supply chains. We can talk of the CGF 2020 pledge, several other company pledges that they made. But the reality on ground is that forest loss is still happening and being linked to commodities like palm, cocoa, soy, etc. And so there's a bit of a disconnect between the policy and then actual implementation on ground. And the gaps include implementation systems that are weak and then also fragmented. So several companies are doing things within their own supply chains to address deforestation issues. But we know that deforestation it cuts across supply chains. The underlying causes, including poverty, livelihood issues, cuts across supply chain. And so it requires a holistic approach, and this cannot be done by just one company. There is also the issue of policy design and implementation capacity. So looking again at forest management, if you look at Africa, there is a huge gap in the number of ALS licensed assessors for ACV, ACSA assessments to help implement some of these requirements. If you take RSPO certification, there's a gap in the number of lead auditors in Africa. And then also even the reviewers who understand the practical issues, the local content, there is a gap in that. We can also look at global standards and regulations against the local realities. So are these standards and regulations being developed with the producers, or they are being developed for the producers? And I was happy that the First Lady spoke about that the farmers themselves should be at the heart of the design of these regulations. And then voluntary action versus enforcement. We need to move beyond just companies voluntarily implementing requirements to looking at how we can enforce and look at the broad base rather than building champions in silos who are doing good things, but the broader base is too low. And we can do that through regulation to bring up the base. So for us to be able to achieve better alignment, we need to shift from just compliance to look at outcome accountability, right? We need to look, so what impacts are you actually having on the ground? How are you managing forests within your supply chain? What is the health of that forest? We should be looking at those outcomes rather than just looking at compliance. we should also be looking at landscape and jurisdictional approaches. With that, we get to work with the smallholders, SMEs, who are within the space, and we work collaboratively to address those issues. And then we also need to focus more on smallholders. They are the majority producers for a lot of the commodities: oil palm, cocoa, rubber, soy, especially in Africa. And so if we want to achieve change at scale, then we cannot say that we are leaving out the smallholders and the SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Mawuli, let me come back to you. You represent now industry, the creme de la creme of the cocoa processing industry in the country. So, talking from their perspective, what are the largest risks that this misalignment that we are talking about occasion for them, and how are they dealing with it?
So, yeah, thank you very much, Larry. I think this is one of the most important aspects of this conversation. Whilst policy has costs, it also has risks. And the level of risk determines who bears the larger share of the costs of every policy. Now, you will appreciate that if you take cocoa, where I'm more familiar with, the policy environment is very broad and wide. It comes from the very first day you want to cultivate, which land you can cultivate, which you cannot, where you can plant, which you cannot plant, which varietal strain you should invest in, who does the investment, extension, so many all the way to the market. There are so many of these policy requirements. So what does that mean in terms of risk and who is bearing the risk and who is managing the risk? I will talk first about small farmers. For small farmers, even the interpretation of these policies is an issue. What does it mean? If you say deforestation-free cocoa, beginning from 2020, what does it mean? For a small farmer, some of the codes in the regulation are so sophisticated that to bring them to their level is a huge risk if you don't want to lose the real meaning of the regulation. And they are the ones that do the activity on the ground. So interpreting the policy at that level is a big risk. Now, you will say that you can overcome that by education, by awareness, by training, and then by exposure. Who bears the cost? Who carries the cost of making sure that at the level of the small farmer, that small policy is well interpreted, they understand it, they are aware of it, and they can actually implement it. But more importantly, they have the incentive to do that because it comes at a cost. So that's the number one risk. The second risk is, what is the benefit? Okay? For all policies, there are interests. There are interests of those who design the policy, and there are interests that must go down to those who must implement it. So for most of these actors, particularly at the smallholder level, they ask themselves, why am I doing this? And the very first question is, what is in it for us? The policy says, do X, Y, Z, or don't do A, B, C. What is the benefit? And that risk very often has not been clearly defined and allocated for them to see, yes, if you do this, this is the benefit. He's dealing with climate change, he's dealing with deforestation, and then say, okay, this is what you do for climate smart behavior, and this is what you do for deforestation. But that must go beyond just saying what it is, to quantify what benefit it engenders for a business enterprise as small as a smallholder. That is the number two risk. Then the number three risk for industry is, what is the level of coordination of these policies? Very often, that coordination is missing. If you take disease, for example, You have so many policies that are pioneering disease at different levels and at different fronts. You don't know which is which. And that undermines, one, a coordinated effort, two, mobilizing finance for such a huge issue, and three, getting everybody behind one formula for disease control. So that risk is massive because everybody is doing, there's no coordination. So as I said, I mentioned the small interpretation, and then I mentioned the multiplicity of all of this and how it is implemented, the cost benefit. And then the one that I think is most important is coordination. Who is responsible for making sure that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet and are going in the same direction, particularly when the interests are varied. So for industry, these are some of the risks that we think for policy to be well aligned must be addressed.
Thank you very much. Claudia, I come back to you. So I know you work in the development cooperation sector. So what kinds of development cooperation and support are needed to help the countries, the companies and farmers navigate this growing complexity? In other words, what is GIS doing?
Okay, so there's definitely there's a huge complexity, and every day it seems to become huger. This is mainly pressurizing as well farmers, of course. Yeah, so this means the efforts that they have to take on their back for delivering traceability, for not using child labor, for managing their living income, etc. It becomes more and more difficult. What we are trying, on the one hand, I have to come back to the EU first. Yeah, the EU at least has accompanied this EUDR reglementation with technical assistance, and that is the Sustainable Cocoa Program. So this is not only GIZ working there, this is as well the FAO, the European Forest Institute, and the Joint Research Center. So this we have as implementing partners different strength, and so everybody is working on the topics where the specific strengths are. For example, for Ghana, then we have now reached that the Ghana Cocoa Traceability System is in place. This has been used since occurring cocoa season, so 25-26. And we have as well developed a cocoa sector child labor monitoring system, which has been piloted in one district, and not very surprisingly, we have found 1,500 cases there. So the thing is that he is talking a lot about the costs, and of course the costs are really the big issue in terms of these systems as well, because there are standard operating procedures for how to deal with child labor cases that are detected, and they have to be handed over to the competent authorities in the country. So this would be in the first line, social welfare, for example. I guess you are all aware that those social ministries are not very well furnished with budgets, so they did not even have the fuel for following up the cases in that district. So that is what we were bridging, but we are not intending to bridge that now for the whole country. This is impossible. We do not have neither the source for that, nor do we see that it makes sense that we are doing it as a development partner. So there now, this must be somehow a shared task of different stakeholders. We are looking there a little bit at a landscape approach as well in that district, to bringing all people who are active there on board. And there I'm counting as well on the World Cocoa Foundation to maybe put some attention to this point, and we can have a bilateral discussion later. Yeah, so I hope that we can convene as well the private sector to become more active in those child labor issues, because the difference between voluntary systems and the national systems is that voluntary systems are only for a limited number of farmers, while the national system is for all 800,000 farmers and their families. So you see a little bit the difference in terms of scope, and you can imagine what that costs if you see what it costs maybe for 1,000 farmers where private sector companies sourcing. It's a different endeavor, yeah. So I think it's worthwhile to finance as well in these national systems. And I think in the traceability system, the private sector had largely time and possibilities of exploring if it's functional, if it is, if you can trust in it, etc. Because the private sector was from the very beginning part of it. In the very beginning, the Cocoa Board has checked the private sector systems to see how are they functioning, what is good, what is maybe still lacking to reach compliance with EUDR. And then after this analysis, these problems have been solved. So the systems were somehow approved. But you see that the source was nevertheless the private sector at that point. At the same time, the private sector was involved in all these steps of testing them in the field, because of course it's the purchasing clerks who are using the applications, it's the depot keepers who can watch from their office how much has been delivered to the purchasing clerk. So I think all this has somehow melted as well the ice. And you know that this overall rollout of the traceability system has only been possible due to the private sector, because they have trained then their own staffs. They have paid for the IT devices that are necessary for using the apps. And I think then this is one of the examples where I would say that policy and the implementation level, they can really shake hands. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Stephen, you are working a lot with companies across Africa. So where are the main bottlenecks in certification and responsible production processes that they face, and also smallholder farmers? Once you think about that, after that, I will come to the audience. If you have any questions, contributions, then I come back to my panel we don't want only to admire the problem, we want to offer some concrete ideas for taking the issue forward. So please think about that. You come with your contribution, then I come to you, the audience, to hear your views as well.
Okay, thank you. So in my view, the main bottlenecks towards sustainability or certification systems and responsible production for smallholders especially, it goes beyond technical. They are structural, they are economic, as well as institutional. And somehow this is also linked to how smallholders are organized and how they operate. And so one key will be governance and enforcement gaps. And we know our part of the world, enforcement is a big challenge. And we have weak governance system that would help drive some of these on ground. And so it's left to the big companies who have the muscle, who have the technical know-how, who have the resources to get external experts to support them to implement some of these requirements. Smallholders do not have that liberty. Also, we can look at data systems and traceability. All of these sustainability schemes require some level of traceability and data systems. Smallholders, SMEs do not have these. They don't have the finances to get these. They don't have the technical know-how to get these. We can also look at, and it's been mentioned already, costs and complexity of certification requirements. And even for the large-scale companies, they complain about the cost. The cost is not easy for them. And then the complexities involved is also not easy for them. There is a land tenure insecurity issues that have been mentioned that also hinders smallholders and SMEs. And then finally, limited access to finance also becomes a big bottleneck. Like we are mentioning, sustainability requirements, compliance is not easy. And they are already struggling to make profits or to have a viable business. And then you want to bring in the additional cost of sustainability with limited financial opportunities. So that also then becomes a bottleneck for them.
Thank you very much. Shall we give them a hand in the meantime for these interventions? Whilst I come to you, the audience, if you have any questions or if you have any contribution, definitely. This is not only a challenge for the panel members, but for all of us, how we can make the system easier and more user-friendly. So if you have any interventions, here is now. Yes, I see a hand here.
Okay, thank you, Larry. My name is Edmond Yabuanyama, a faculty member, UCC. In the morning I came, everything is centered as if in the supply chain there is equal power. The power can be financial power, of which it is no. So if we want to come with policies that will support the supply chain artists, and in this case, we are centered on the production, then there should be a focal firm that must take responsibility and extend support. If not, it will be like any other policy that has good intention, but when it comes, implementation is zero. And the outcome is not there. So going forward, I believe that the focal firms who are having more power, it could be financial power or other resources, technology, should extend enough support to the other acts of the chain so that these policies will really yield something. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Any other? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Lillian. I work with Soko Devi. I'm just interested in finding out, presently in Ghana, what are the certification programs that for our cocoa sector alone? How easy is it for the regulator, Cocoa Board, to coordinate and facilitate these certification and policy alignment with their programs in Ghana? Thank you.
Good. Yes, there's one here.
Thank you very much. Again, Karija Konate from Côte d'Ivoire. My question will go to Mr. Mawuli from WCF. As you spoke about the coordinated effort to make sure there is alignment of policies, I would like to know, as organization also bring together many companies, what are your plans, or how do you proceed to make sure that there is also coordination happening between or among your members regarding the different sustainability topics. I mean, child labor, living income, and all of those very important fundamental topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other? No other intervention. Okay. Thank you very much. So let me come to you.
Yes.
Dr. Coffie, you had a direct question.
Yes. Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you for those questions. But before I answer the lady's question, to emphasize that one of the things that World Cocoa Foundation does is by using its influence to convene stakeholders. That convening power is utilized first and foremost to achieve harmonization of all initiatives, ideas, and technologies in the industry. For those of you who follow, every year, the World Cocoa Foundation organizes the Global Partnership Forum, during which they bring all policy, technology, NGOs, civil society, businesses together, in excess of over 500 delegates across 40 countries, to actually begin to discuss what are the points of coordination and harmonization of all these initiatives. And World Cocoa Foundation does that at its own cost, so that it can be a catalyst that stimulates the conversation around these issues. And that happens every year. Thankfully, next year, for the first time in the history of Ghana, it will happen in Ghana. So the World Cocoa Foundation Partnership Meeting will be in Ghana in March. Now, concretely to your question about what does World Cocoa Foundation do to ensure that this diverse policy environment can be brought together, one of the things that World Cocoa Foundation does is specifically to harmonize some of these things, not as an entity, but by working with stakeholders to ensure that all are pulled together into one place. Be it living income. You remember a year or two ago, we published the Living Income Survey that sets the baseline, the benchmark for living income analysis. And that is part of the contribution it provides to industry to be aware of how living income is measured and actually determined. And then child labor, if you're also aware that one of the things that World Cocoa Foundation does aggressively across all the production countries is to pursue stakeholders how to stem the tide of child labor, particularly in cocoa, and that is even more important in Ghana. Now, the reason for this is that as an industry association, we are interested in bringing everybody together because our philosophy is that no one single entity has the capacity and the space to achieve all of that. But if we bring all of us together around the table, we can achieve more. So our push is that let the conversation start with all of us. When we develop the solutions, let us implement it together. That way, we can assure the sector of accountability and responsibility. So throughout the conversation, you hear us talk about accountable behavior and responsible behavior. Somebody must be responsible, and somebody must hold somebody accountable. So to that extent, World Cocoa Foundation tries to push that agenda. As I said earlier on, we are talking of the multiple research initiatives in the tackling of disease, for example. We are in the process of pulling all that together and showing the world that can we all do it this way and let everybody feed into that. That way, we are likely to achieve more. As they say, when we scatter our efforts, we achieve little. But when we pull all together, we achieve more. So World Cocoa Foundation is at the forefront of being the catalyst of some of these coordination and harmonization initiatives. And most of the stakeholders here will attest to the fact that we have other work with them, with GIZ, with SMESCO, SECO, ITC. We have other work with one or two of them, trying to bring all this into one place. We are not going in parallel or in opposite directions.
Thank you very much. Claudia, you know, the prof talks about power relations along the value chain. Is that something you relate to, and do you have any comments on that?
To be honest, I would rather first of all jump on the one question that has been asked, and that is how easy is it for COCOBOT to implement these policies now? It's not easy at all, of course, but they are somehow the best in the class at that moment, yeah. So the other countries are struggling much more with, for example, the traceability system. So I think somehow Ghana is the country which shows again and again a lot of commitment. And what they have to do is they put in plenty of manpower into that. So you need, this is not only here COCOBOT in Accra, of course, yeah. So here in Accra, this is the strategic persons, etc. But they have as well plenty of people that are working on the ground. So in each district, there is the COCO extension agents, and at the end of the day, the whole work that starts at the policy level trickles down to the CEAs in the district. And they will have to learn everything about deforestation. They have to learn everything about traceability. They have to learn everything about child labor issues, about gender, about African regional standard. And I could talk still half an hour longer, but I mean, these persons, I always feel a little bit pity for them, because I feel they are really overwhelmed with topics. And what we are doing for easing their task is that we look rather topic-wise at things. Yeah, so of course you can talk about child labor coming from regional standard. You can talk about child labor coming from CS. So what we are doing is we are concentrating of child labor and enforced labor, and this is then the topic of one training exercise. It doesn't matter for farmers, for example, if this comes from EUDR, if it comes from CSDDD, or it comes from the Japanese export law, whatever, it doesn't matter, yeah? What they need to know is what is expected from them, and they have to understand why they are doing this. And that is why we are separating the different topics. And then you don't have to look at the systems one by one. This does make no sense. So the COCOBOT has developed several, they call it desks in general. So they have a gender desk, they have an African regional desk, and they have the traceability desk. So there is behind all of these desks, there's minimum 16 up to 30 people behind who are working constantly on these topics. So, of course, for a traceability system, you do not only have the technical team. Yeah, you have as well IT team and so on. Yeah, this has many different aspects that you have to integrate. And that is as well one of the challenges if you work on these topics, is that you have to overcome a little bit a type of silo mentality. The silo mentality exists within organizations, but exists as well between different donors, between different implementing partners or whatever. So this is something that we have to take seriously care of, that we have this tendency to work in teams, to work in collaboration, and not fighting each other because we're competing for the same funds or whatever. So the COCOBOT, anyhow, they have we have spent from GIZ side €1 million for accompanying them with a traceability system. This includes as well material costs like the tags for tagging the cocoa bags, or IT materials, several issues like that. And then plenty of training. Training for the private sector agents, training for the farmers, sensitization measures. So in a whole, this has all been accompanied by the COCOBOT staff, and I cannot give you a number for that, but you can imagine during 3 years having a team of 30 persons working on that. This is as well immense costs. So there is a high commitment for reaching the goals, and they have as well invested in it. And so there is a business model needed as well between private sector and the COCOBOT then, in the sense of they would be delivering a service and they get a fee for it. So discussions have already been entailed, so to my knowledge. So let's hope the best, that you will find a very quick solution to it, and that you do not forget about the premium for the farmers to be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a question on sustainability schemes in the cocoa sector. Well, I see Fair Trade here, Rainforest Alliance, and I believe there are others in the room. But please see me. I can link you with some of them here. Now, time is always the enemy to a good conversation. So I would like to come to you, Stephen, to say just quickly, what is one practical change that will make sustainability and policy systems more coherent, interoperable, and useful for producers and SMEs over the next 2-3 years? Same question for all of you, but you start. Come to Dr. Coffie whilst Claudia takes a breather and then has the last word. So
okay.
You start.
Okay, so it is fundamentally about moving from fragmented compliance systems to a more shared, data-driven, one with aligned definitions, aligned and mutual recognition. So if government companies are working together and we have aligned definitions and we recognize the same or verified outputs, right? So if there's a system in Ghana that audits and verifies the outputs from a system, and that is respected by an organization in the European Union, then that helps address some of the bottlenecks that we see in the system. And then if we have systems, traceability systems that are operable, that are communicating, and we don't need to build individual traceability systems, that would also help address some of these challenges. And then finally, if we look at landscape approaches and collaboration, where all actors are working together, and it is not just one trying to address issues, but we all come together, smallholders, large companies, governments, communities, landowners, etc., are sharing responsibility, are sharing investments to address issues, then that is what will drive the change that we want to see at scale.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coffie.
Yes. So let me build on what Stephen just said. For us at World Cocoa Foundation, it's very important that for us to align policy and ensure that we can remove the fragmentation that we see and harmonize all the efforts so that better impact for the sector. I think 3 things are important. The first one is trust. You see, when you want to share data, it can only happen in an environment. If you want to open up your operations to another system, you have to be comfortable that there will not be compromises because you share the information. So trust is of utmost importance, particularly for businesses. The second thing is commitment. A lot of the time, these policy initiatives are thrown out there, but there's no behind it to make sure that it actually travels the full cost of its operationalization. Midway, it gets truncated, or it loses steam, and then they pick up another thing. And that confuses farmers quite a great deal. They don't know exactly what to believe in. They don't even, the following day when they wake up, you will not bring up something new. And then the final is investment. When policies are, formulated and thrown out there, most of the time it doesn't come with the requisite investment. As I indicated in an earlier comment, it comes with cost. But there's no investment. It is assumed that somebody will bear the cost. Somebody will bear for training. Somebody will bear the cost for knowledge sharing, building capacity, awareness, education, and all of that. While Cocoa Foundation and its members are always at the forefront of making sure that farmers are aware, they are well educated, particularly those in their supply chains. But what about those that are outside the supply chain? Who is making the investment? Who is building the infrastructure for the uptake of those policy initiatives? So these are the three things that I think if we do, we will improve the environment for policy formulation, policy execution, and uptake that will benefit the entire industry.
Claudia.
Okay, I will make use of my speaking time for reminding as well of one person who has not made it to this panel, and that is Alex Asanvo from the CIGCI. I mean, he's playing a key role as well in already aligning the policies of two countries. He is taking as well, or the whole organization, of course, is taking a key role in bringing together all the stakeholders. And here we are talking really about even scientists that join the farmers and the private sector and the development partners and so on, and the public sector. We have this example now in terms of the CSSVD, yeah? So there's a joint strategy that has been developed between the two countries. And this joint strategy has been presented recently on an Abidjan conference. And GSZ has as well taken the responsibility for two of the working groups. The strategy has 5 pillars, and we have signed in for taking care of the working group farmer sensitization, and for the working group rehabilitation of infected farms. And that is exactly the point where the policy and the implementation part, they meet each other. So this coordination that we are supposed to do there would exactly look at the alignment of the two. This is about harmonizing the different approaches of programs. This is about then as well taking the consent of the two governments for the roadmap that will be developed and so on. So I think this is as well a very important measure or a very important task that CIGCI is playing in this overall game that will bring the alignment of policy and implementation forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall we give them a hand again? So, to build on Claudia, I bring you special apologies from Alex Asanvo, who had really planned to be here, but some equally important two-nation assignment came his way. That is why he couldn't come here. So what have we heard in this panel? Well, that yes, there are so many policies on sustainability, on certification at various levels that has been acknowledged by this panel. And the implication of those on the value chains caused confusion among producers, difficulty in compliance. Those have also been acknowledged. But also hope that we can work towards coherence. We can seek collaboration to make it simpler as an objective for the value chains to understand, value chain actors to understand and to comply with these policies for the good of all. He pointed out to some tools that exist already that can be shared, that can be optimized so that together we work towards proper alignment and ease of implementation for the value chains. So this is the last session. I just want all of us to give a special thanks and clap to Juliana, who truly inspired the conversation this morning that gave us the energy to come to this far. Shall we rise and give her a big, big, big clap for setting us in the right direction today? Juliana, you are truly the hero, the heroine of this symposium. Thank you so much. Thank you.